Hello and welcome to Develop Your Power Skills, Identify and Leverage Your Transferable Skills to Land a Great Job. My name is Cheryl, and I will be your ghost host for today. And I'm very excited to see you at 2020 Love Conference, hosted by the Office of Leadership Development, sponsored by Xfinity and Coca-Cola, and in partnership with the Wellness Resource Center and Career Center. I am very pleased to introduce you to Callie and Holly. So now without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Callie and Holly to introduce themselves.
Great, thanks so much, Cheryl. We're really excited to be here and to present this workshop for you all. Of course, there we go. So my name is Callie Condo, or Calista Condo. Callie's just easier to say. I'm an employer partnerships outreach specialist with the Temple University Career Center. I am a pet mom of adopted pets. I love my pets. This is just a little bit of information about me. And I've also worked in mentoring and nonprofit in the past, as well as in the newspaper journalism world. And so I'll let Holly introduce herself.
Thanks, Callie. Hi, everyone. My name is Holly Logan. I work with Callie in the Career Center at Temple University. And here's a little bit about me as well. I'm a proud Temple alumnus twice over, and I currently work in the Career Center on the employer partnership side of the house, focusing on organizations like government, nonprofit, law and legal services, and the arts. I also have the privilege of advising one of our student organizations, our Temple Veterans Association, and I get to be an advisor for this year's service immersion program trip. So I'm really excited to connect with more students and to talk with you all today.
Thanks, Holly. And so a little bit about the Temple University Career Center. We serve all Temple students, alumni, undergrad and graduate level. We create events to connect with employers. We host the university-wide career fairs, which we just had this past week. We do career fairs every semester. And then we also focus on industry trends and try to understand what employers are looking for when they hire. And we also help students, so we meet one-on-one with them, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go into the presentation. So before we get started, I really like to do some acknowledgements. I think that they're important and they set the tone for what we're going to talk about today. So first off, you're here doing something to better yourself and grow, so yay for you. Pat yourself on the back. You're putting yourself out there, you're coming to experience something new and maybe learn a little bit, so that's great. The future is very uncertain. We want to acknowledge that. So the present is also very uncertain. We're going day by day, and pretty much everybody right now in our country is doing that. And we want to acknowledge that that's kind of the place where we're at right now. We also just want to acknowledge that we're going to be discussing resources and tips to help you on your future path. Not all of them may work for you, or might not be something you want to try out right away, but these are kind of the best practices that we've learned through our experience in career development. And then finding a job is hard work. We just want to put that out there. So there's no quick fix. There's no immediate way to kind of just find that perfect job. It takes time, it takes effort, and we'll hopefully prepare you for what that's going to look like. And then self-acceptance and self-care are really important. We're going to talk a lot about authenticity today, and take some time for self-reflection to be purposeful about what your job search will look like and hopefully help you land a really great job. Accepting where you are and what you are doing right now is really important, and comparing yourself to others is not a great practice. So it's really about focusing inward and kind of looking at yourself. With that being said, we are going to talk about deconstructing some concepts. So the idea of success, a lot of the times we think the idea of success is being the best, but it's not necessarily that. And I really like this quote from Simone Biles. So when Simone Biles won all her gold medals, people were saying, "You're the next Usain Bolt, you're the next Michael Phelps, what does that feel like?" And she simply responded, "No, I'm not. I'm the first Simone Biles. And so she was really owning her accomplishments and what she did and the work that she put in. And so I like to use that as a way to focus kind of what we're going to do today. So what does success mean to you? So the definition of success is the accomplishment of an aim or a purpose. So that means your aim plus your purpose equals your success. It's not about you compared to someone else. It's about what are your goals, what are your aims, and how are you going to accomplish them. So basically, success is personal. We really want to focus on deconstructing the idea that your major equates to your career. And specifically today, in this time and place, we have to start thinking creatively about what our careers can look like and really focus on how our major is preparing us for the world of employment and not necessarily limiting us to what opportunities we can have. So it's your skills, your knowledge, and your purpose. And by purpose, I mean your aim and kind of what you want to accomplish. And that kind of equals your career. Career paths are seldom ever linear, and I did want to share a little bit about myself. So I went to undergrad and I graduated with a degree in communications and journalism. I worked as a photojournalist for 8 years, but that's a hard industry to be in. And so I had to supplement my income by working 2 jobs. And then finally, through volunteer work, I kind of found my passion. And I switched over to working in nonprofit and mentorship work for Big Brothers Big Sisters. Through that, I started working with college students and really loved that. And now here I am in higher education, working in career services. And so I also wanted to invite Holly to share a little bit about her journey because it really kind of shows how your major does not limit you in what you can do in your career.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Callie. Very similarly, I majored in public relations in my undergrad life at Temple, and I had a couple of different ideas about what I might do with that degree, but I ended up participating in an AmeriCorps program, a National Civilian Community Corps, quick shout out, and it was a great experience being on a team of folks and getting to experience a lot of different projects in different regions of the country. And so through those opportunities, then similarly, I went into a nonprofit world and started working in those spaces, and then international leadership development. And I had a sense in the back of my head that I wanted to get back involved in higher ed. And so then when this opportunity came about to come back and work with Temple students, I couldn't turn it down. So I was very excited. And yeah, being back in higher ed and career services is not something I necessarily thought of when I went to pursue a public relations degree, but here I am and I'm very excited and to get to work with college students. So.
Thanks for sharing, Holly. There's so many different roles within specific industries and roles that may correlate to your major, but are in industry areas that you might not have even thought about working in. And so, how do you correlate kind of who you are, what you're passionate about, what you like to do with finding that job? And so we're going to kind of go into that now. So we're going to take a minute. We're going to try the next few slides. We're going to focus on taking an inventory of ourselves. So if you have a notepad and a pen, or if you wanted to just type kind of in a Word document, let's think about some of these things. So how do you work? And by that, I mean, do you kind of wait until you're up against a deadline to finish something? Are you a planner? Do you love a to-do list? Think about those things and think about how you work. And feel free to add your comments in the chat. We'd love to hear what you have to say. How are you creative? So, do you take time and really think about things and put things together in a way that you can understand? Or are you impulsive and you just feel like you have these emotions and thoughts and you kind of have to get them out and, write them down? Do you like to write? Do you paint? Do you draw? Like, what is your creative flow? And then how do you communicate? I talk a lot. And I also talk to process my thoughts. Other colleagues of mine, they sit back, they take in information, and they need time to ruminate on it. They need time to think about it. So how do you communicate?
We have some folks in the chat. I tend to jump right in, but I also tend to be organized when it comes to work. So different processes for different parts of one's life.
Great. And so one of the things that's really helped me, so I didn't always know how I worked. I didn't know what my workflow was. I didn't know how I was creative or how I thought of things. I also have done a lot of work to understand how I communicate. So down the bottom of our slide, there's a few websites that actually for free give you some interesting feedback. So you can analyze yourself and think about, oh yeah, no, I really do, act this way, or I am this personality type. It just kind of gives you some time to reflect on yourself. And so I do highly recommend doing those tests now that you have some time, and also before you start pursuing that job hunt.
And all those links are pasted in the chat if you want to just copy and paste them.
Thanks, Holly. Okay, so the next part is thinking about what are your interests and your values? What do you like to do? What is important to you? And this can be, very wide ranging. We contain multitudes as humans. So I, obviously like photography. I like art. I like reading. I like music. I like a lot of different things, and I like learning about a lot of things. So what are some of the things that you like to do? Doesn't necessarily have to be, pertaining to the job search itself, or what you hope to do in your career, but just in general, what do you like? And then also, what's important to you? What do you value? Do you value honesty? Do you value equity? Is it important for you to focus on your family and have work-life balance? Is it important to you to reach your aspirations? Are you very driven? Feel free to add those in the chat, and also just kind of take some time to think about those. Great. I see one that says they want to be in a career where they can travel a decent amount. That's really exciting to think about. All right, so we're going to move on to one more. So now we're going to take an inventory of our strengths and our goals. What are we good at? What are our personality qualities or personal qualities? What do you know how to do? What experiences have you had that you've gained knowledge or you've learned from? And what do you want to do? So let's take a minute to think about this. Feel free to write that down or add some information into the chat. If you want to brag about what you're good at, that would go ahead. For instance, I know I'm a people person, so I really like connecting with people, and that's important to me. And I feel like I want to do that moving forward. I always want to kind of have that as a part of what I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have, I'm extroverted, so I love to talk. I like to learn about people. I'll say also similarly, Callie, yeah, I like to work in teams. So like in two different parts, right? Like it's like I like to think on my own and process information sometimes, and then work and collaborate with groups of people to create something or provide a program or a service.
Great. One person just shared that they're president of a student org and they've learned a lot about their leadership skills. I think that's a great point. You don't always know what type of leadership skills you have until you're placed into a position of leadership, and how you support others, bring people together, and then also, work to get things done. So that's a great point. Now that we've taken some inventory about ourselves, we can really focus on skills and competencies. And like before, I do want to break down the definition of what a skill is. So a skill or a competency is an ability, the ability to do something well, successfully, or efficiently. And so what skills do you have right now? And there's different types of skills. So when we say transferable skills, we mean interpersonal or soft skills like communication, teamwork, leadership, problem solving, time management. Those are your soft skills or competencies. And then your hard skills are those more technical skills. So what computer skills or software skills do you have? Do you know Photoshop? Do you know Adobe Suite? Do you know Excel really well? Do you have point of sales training or experience? Those are your more technical skills. And these are skills that we'll talk about when we get to our resume section, how you can reflect these skills. So take some time, think about what skills you have right now and write them down if you are able to do that. If you want to share in the chat, you can, feel free. Flexibility, that's a good one. So for the skills section, there's an organization called NACE, and it is a cohort of career services and employers coming together to understand how we can create a well-rounded pipeline from secondary or post-secondary education into the workforce. And these are some of the top competencies or skills that employers look for. So those first three are the top three that employers hope that their new employees will have. The other competencies they look for, you'll see spread throughout the slide. I do want to take some time again and define some of these. And I'm really big on these definitions because I feel like we as a society might have an idea or connotation associated to a word, and we just really want to be on the same page. So for critical thinking, that means making decisions and overcoming problems. For communication, articulating thoughts and ideas clearly and effectively in either written or spoken forms. The main one I want to focus on is professionalism, because I really don't like the word professional because it has a connotation of being stuffy and inauthentic. And throughout my professional career, and I can also probably say throughout Holly's, we both found that that's not necessarily what a professional environment is. When we use the word professional, it's about focusing on how your actions affect others. So the definition that they provide for professional is personal accountability and effective work habits, punctuality, working productively with others, and time workload management, understanding the impact of nonverbal communication on professional work, and then also you demonstrate integrity, ethical behavior, and you act responsibly with the interests of the larger community in mind. So that seems pretty well-rounded. I don't think it means, wearing a suit and tie every day and speaking in a certain way that you would not normally speak. It's more about how your actions affect others and how your actions affect the larger company or the bigger picture. And so I did want to just point that out because we do say professional a lot. And when I say professional, in my heart, genuinely, I mean this. Presenting yourself professionally, presenting yourself in a way that's authentic, but with the understanding of how you are going into the world and affecting others. So we've taken some inventory, we've talked about skills and what they mean, and now I just wanted to take some time to focus on that exploration piece. So you've taken inventory of what you know, what you understand, what experiences you've had. Now you can start thinking about how to broaden that inventory. What can you do with this major is a resource that we have on our website. It's fantastic. It tells you what employers are inclined to hire certain majors. And I will say a lot of employers, when they post jobs, they select all majors or they select multiple different types of majors. But it gives you a good idea of different pathways within that industry area. LinkedIn Learning has some really great workshops and things that you can learn about. LinkedIn and the OWL Network alumni tool give you the opportunity to search alumni and see what they studied and see where they are now. So you may be able to gain some information from that and maybe even connect with them to learn more. Handshake is a great tool to look at different companies as well as to make sure that you're connecting with employers in a great way. Candid Careers is a informational interview streaming site that has some Temple alumni on there as well. You can watch videos and learn about their career paths. Informational interviews that you can conduct yourself. You can talk to your family, you can talk to your friends, you can talk to Holly or myself, someone at the Career Center. You can learn about how folks got to the place that they're at in their career now, and that may give you some insight as to the next steps that you may want to take. And then CareerShift is a job searching platform as well that's on our online resources, but it also gives you an idea of how you can take your transferable skills and really apply to all different types of opportunities.
Callie, we had a question about how do we show, from the previous slides, how do we show these competencies to professional employers or
Great.
potential employers, excuse me.
Great. So the way we're going to show that is through your resume and through the bullet points that you put on your resume and the experiences that you choose to present. You also being able to talk about your resume is a great part. And then LinkedIn, your online presence, LinkedIn, Handshake, Indeed, you can have profiles on all of those websites. And so Holly's actually going to step in and start talking about resumes in the next slide. So she'll go more in depth into how you can show those skills. But great question. So before we jump into the resume, I just wanted to reflect a little bit on what we just talked about in that exploring part. So career services. Whether you go to Temple or you go to a different university, there is a career services office that I would believe there is. Usually for our office specifically, we have one-on-one appointments. You can come in for multiple appointments. If you're just starting out, that career exploration piece, you can come in for that. If you're putting your resume together, you can come in for your resume. If you've landed an interview and you want to prep for that interview, we're here and we'll have an appointment with you to help you with that as well. We look at resumes, we look at LinkedIn profiles. We also host a ton of events and workshops throughout the semester that you can sign up for. Again, like I said, we have our career fairs. We have career fair prep events as well, so you can prepare, you can try to feel more comfortable going into that career fair. And then Handshake is where most of our jobs and events, everything is posted right there. And you should, as Temple students, you should all have a Handshake account. For that self-growth and development piece, like we said, there's a lot that you can gain and learn from even just picking up a hobby or volunteering. I think volunteering, I used to hire, and I think volunteering on a resume is really fantastic. You've probably gained some experience from it, but it shows that you are a engaged citizen in the community around you and that you'll be a good team member to work with. So there are some tips on self-growth and development. And then for the job and internship search, we stress that you should focus on filters and location. So in all job searches, you can go in and you can filter. Sometimes those keyword searches don't always bring back what you're looking for. We suggest that you make your profiles really good. So upload your resume once it's done. Research employers that you may want to connect with and follow and connect with those employers. Create a strong profile, have a professional photo, all of those things. And Holly's going to talk a little bit more about those steps.
All right, so I'm going to go through a couple of questions and I'm going to see if anybody wants to share their thoughts in the chat box. So first I'm going to start out like, what is a resume? What do people think its purpose is and how have you might have used a resume in the past? So feel free to use the chat like basic, this isn't a trick question. What do you think a resume is and how have you used it? whether in applying for a job or an internship. Yeah, so we have to showcase who you are and your experience on paper. Thanks, Kamani. Yeah. Nice. Okay, maybe we can hop to the next point. So what goes on a resume? What kind of things do you highlight? Like, feel free to share your thoughts in the chat. Like, what are different pieces of information about yourself do you typically include on a resume? Before we had also, Cheryl included resume as a paper that gives the employers a vague view of who you are. Yeah, it's like a general piece. And then we also have what's included: any experience, relevant skills, important projects, if relevant, education. Yep, skills, education, experience. Perfect. Yeah, well, I'll go in a little bit more on the next slide, but my last question is, how long do you think an employer looks at a resume? Oh, somebody has attended this before. They knew right away. Yes, 6 seconds, 6 seconds. And that may seem like not a lot of time, but I will say, and Callie can probably speak to this too, as a former interviewer and hiring manager, we know, and employers know exactly what they're looking for typically. So they take those 6 seconds to scan to those sections of a resume. And that's why it's so important, and I'll talk a little bit about this, but it's so critical to spend time really honing the information that you put on there to match whatever job or internship description that you're applying to ensure that the best and most relevant information is on there, this one page. So yeah, so it's 6 seconds, but they use that time very wisely. They know exactly what they're looking for. So here are this is part of the question too, and thank you to the folks that answered. These are the general sections that are included on a resume. You have your header, which usually includes your name and your contact information. Make it easy for the employer to find you. You don't want them wondering like, what's their phone number? Like, you want to be ready to be contacted for an interview for when it's time. And then you have as a student, you always have your education there, the first piece at the top, because that's the piece that you are currently experiencing is your education. As long as you're a student, keep it there. And some people, as you become more of an experienced professional, tend to move it to the bottom. So keep that in mind. And then the experience you'll see over here on the right side of the screen, different categories. Sometimes people call it relevant experience, sometimes they call it work experience. This section can also include volunteer experience, because most employers don't actually care if you're getting paid. If you're developing these skills that we're talking about, these transferable skills, that's what's really important, and that can happen in a lot of volunteer experiences. And so you see this person was a Jumpstart core team member, and the types of explanations that they give in those bullet points. And then over to the left, typically the next sections will be those activities, affiliations. Sometimes it's the honors or awards or involvement. It's called different things. You don't have to keep it the same. It looks different on different resumes. For the titles and classifications, but it just tells a bigger picture of who you are and your experiences. And then the skills at the bottom, Callie referenced earlier, sometimes called hard skills, but usually it's your technical skills or your language skills. So if you're proficient in some other language, definitely include that there, because that can be really valuable to a lot of employers. Typically in the skills section, we don't recommend as a career center to include any of the interpersonal or soft skills, because those things should come up in your cover letter or in an interview when you have that chance to talk a little bit more broadly about yourself and the way that you work in a team or that sort of thing. And also it comes up in those bullet points that you list in your resume up top. And so real quick, just if you go back, the format and the order of things, it can look different based on the industry that you're applying to. So say you're looking at a company in more of a STEM field, sometimes they really want to see those technical skills moved up. So those are usually just below education. So just be mindful, and definitely we'll drop a link to our career guide in the chat. If you may be getting a print copy also, or you might have one already if you've been in the Temple University Career Center, but definitely take a look. There's tons of samples in there for different industry areas depending on what you're interested in. So, all right, thanks, Callie. And then, so this is what I was referencing earlier, the effective bullet points and where you're really telling more of your story. And so be more specific than you typically are used to when you're, telling a larger story. These bullet points are supposed to be very quick pieces of information. And so oftentimes we talk about quantifiables or measurables. So these are the numbers that you want to explain a story. And so sometimes it's basically like the number of customers that I might have seen in a weekly basis if I'm in retail or customer service, or the amount of customers that I helped if I'm on like a helpline. And so it tells the story about your capacity for your workload, and that paints a picture. And then in those 6 seconds, that employer can quickly see that piece of information and understand your capacity for workload. And sometimes giving detail about programs or software in your bullet points can also help the employer understand better how you applied those skills. And then we talk a lot about too showing how an action you took led to a result, and that can be explained effectively in our STAR method. Sometimes we talk about, and that's in the career guide too. There's some exercises that you can practice. Sometimes people talk about the SARA method, but it's basically thinking about a situation or a task that you're encountering, the action that you took, and the result that came from it. So that's how you can formulate those bullet points, and that can be a good, helpful way to do that succinctly. And then really we talk about owning what you did. A lot of times in the work that we do, whether students or professionals, we work in teams. And so sometimes we want to share that credit. But when you're sitting there and the employer is taking those 6 seconds, they only care about what you did. They don't care about what your team did. And this is your time to shine. And Callie, I think you had another piece that you wanted to highlight.
Yeah, so I think in the we have a lot of active verbs in the career guide that we use, and assist is a weak action verb. It doesn't really take that ownership of what you did, and so collaborated or supported, there's other words to use, and in the career guide on that page you'll actually see some action verbs that you should maybe stray away from.
Yes. And also there's a comment in the question and answer section that yes, in a lot of different schools and colleges within Temple University, there may be relevant templates that are recommended. So definitely use a lot of different advice. You take what you think is most useful for you. You'll share your resume with 7 different people and get 8 different opinions oftentimes. And so it's just using what information you find most helpful for yourself. And there's also in the career guide on page 8, there's the skills, not tasks guidelines that we recommend folks focus on when they're creating these effective bullet points and thinking about their honing, like more highlighting those skills that they're elaborating on by those experiences. So,
and Kelly, real quick,
please, yeah.
To Wendy's question, she spoke about templates that are used for the schools they attend versus, based on the industry you might be applying to. But I do say what we presented here today in the format and the layout and the templates that we have in the career guide, those are based on industry best trends from employers. So what do employers really look for? And I think, like Holly said, they're taking 6 seconds. They want to know where things are. So when you get those fancy templates from Google or Word, that doesn't always stick with the format that employers might be used to. If you are in a creatives field, it's okay to get a little bit more creative and design your resume maybe more aesthetically. But I do think that it's nice to have that basic templated resume for employers as well.
Yeah, it's a good starting point, especially for an undergraduate student, and keeping it to that one page. But yeah, it might come up in the next slide. Yeah, so here are some general do's and don'ts that we're recommending overall as a career center. Keeping that one main resume as a foundational document or a template that you use to then apply to a variety of jobs or internships. And so you're definitely trying to hone the content on each new resume, but you have that, at least that foundational document to work from. So you're not starting from scratch every time. Keeping in mind, keeping some space around the text that you have on the page, but it's not like hard and fast, like a research paper where there's like specific margins, but it's usually it's a little bit easier on the eyes when it has a little bit of space around it. And then so folks, if they print it out, they can take notes on it and keep relevant information connected to you for when they call you for an interview. Be consistent in your formatting. throughout, just so then it keeps the employer's eye focused, like Callie was saying earlier. Practice talking about your resume with either your roommates or your family or your friends, because sure enough, in your interview, you're most likely to be asked about some of the experiences that you listed in those bullet points. And so it's good to have an effective answer so that you're succinct too in your response. Proofread, and then proofread again. It's much like when you write a research paper or some document for your classes. Sometimes when you're so in it, it's hard to always see some of the content or the spelling errors and that sort of thing. So getting another set of eyes on it. And that's what the Career Center is for also. We have very kind, gentle coaches who are happy to review your cover letter and your resumes and other documents to be those other set of eyes for you. And there's also the Writing Center for Temple University. And what other university you go to, there's a lot of different resources. So some don'ts we wanted to highlight is we don't recommend including an objective or a summary at the top. Once you're in university or college, you don't need to summarize yourself in that spot, because we refer to resumes as precious real estate. You have this one page that you're trying to summarize yourself and your experiences in relation to the job you're applying to. And that usually small paragraph takes up too much space. So you really want to focus in on those other pieces of the resume. Don't underestimate your experience. Talk about yourself. This is your time to shine, like we've been saying, honing in on the skills that you've developed over the years. Don't send it as a Word or Google Doc, because much like the formatting that we've been talking about, keeping consistent, and the Callie mentioned, if you have, different ways that you're creatively designing your file, those things can possibly get messed up when you send that file in those formats. So we recommend PDFing it, creating a PDF, because then it's frozen as you created it and the intention that you were sharing it in. Don't use a font smaller than 10 point, and don't change the different fonts from section to section or line to line. A lot of folks who are reading your resume may have older eyes, and so it's nice to keep the font a little bit bigger for us. It makes it easier to read. And we also don't recommend using acronyms or abbreviations unless you've explained it somewhere also on your resume, because you don't want to make it too much work for the employer. So they have those 6 seconds, so keep it easy for them. And then on the next slide, we have a couple of samples that came from the career guide that kind of talk about like a very simple format that we recommend for most industries, most majors. This is just like a basic format, as Callie referenced earlier. And again, some industries will be looking for different sections to go in different places. And so just, take this with a grain of salt, and then use other templates that might fit what you're looking for too. So, yeah. And then next slide, I think, is you, Callie.
Yeah, thanks, Holly.
Yeah.
Just trying to unmute myself, and lots of technical thing clicking here and there. So we want to take a second too to talk about authenticity and kind of what that means. So authentic means real or genuine, and a lot of the times we want to focus on that authenticity when we're thinking about our personal brand. And I like to focus on breaking down the barriers between my personal self and my professional self. I feel like I just want to come as my authentic self, no matter what I'm doing. And so I hate talking about myself. Who hates talking about themselves? Anybody else? Okay, it can be kind of awkward. And we tend to downplay, like we've been talking about, what we've done or what we've accomplished, and we are our own worst critics. So I always like to focus on talking about yourself as your friend would talk about you, or how would you describe your best friend? Think about that for a second. And now think about yourself. How do you describe yourself? Are you kind to yourself? Are you gracious to yourself? Do you describe yourself how you would describe your best friend? If not, then maybe we can do some work there and think about how you can start, presenting yourself in a loving and kind way. Once you've learned how to own your accomplishments and really value the skills that you have, you can talk about yourself like you would talk about a friend. And again, I want to bring up, professionalism doesn't mean being inauthentic. So when you present yourself to anyone, you can be your authentic self with that confidence of knowing you have those skills and abilities. And one part of presenting yourself is making connections. And they can very much help you get a job. And so we use that word networking, which again, that connotation in my mind, I think going to an event and handing out business cards and superficially meeting people, that's not what making connections or networking really means. It means building relationships with folks, either within your field or outside of your field, and throughout your life. And those connections can help you land a job. Connecting with others also gives you practice talking about yourself. So if you are going to an event or you've gone to the career fair and you did a one-on-one with an employer, you are practicing that talking experience. There's also a lot of alumni, student and alumni mixer events that you can attend to learn how to talk to professionals as well. And so your personal brand is all about who you are, what is your story, what is your experience, and how do you tell others about yourself? And so Holly's going to go into talk about LinkedIn in a little bit of how you can ingrain this into your profile.
Yeah. And so this is a sample from one of our fabulous career ambassadors, a student who works in our office, Mr. Mack. He's graciously allowed us to share his as a template or example. So LinkedIn is one more resource that you have to share with others as to tell your story more broadly. And especially employers will be looking at LinkedIn as another viewpoint of yourself. They'll complement it usually with your resume and to understand a little bit more about you. And so the general profile, your LinkedIn profile, you have a summary about yourself up top, and then you talk about your experiences, much like you would, and your skills throughout your LinkedIn, but it's another chance to be a little bit more descriptive, connect. You can attach media within LinkedIn to tell your story a little bit more broadly. So we recommend trying to have a professional photo of some capacity, sort of like Nasir does here. And we actually have a file that we're going to share to give you some advice on using your mobile phone or your smartphone to take a photo that's good for your profile photo here. So we also encourage students to use LinkedIn, and Callie, I think, referenced this earlier, and like using that alumni tool. So if you're a Temple student or if you go to another university, there's a way that you can connect. And Temple alum, and I'll speak for myself too, love to hear from fellow owls and just helping along with your path and learning more about each other. So definitely use that tool. Follow 3 relevant companies or join 3 relevant groups to get more involved in that, making those connections with people that are in similar interest areas, whether it's professional or personal. And that's a good way to reach out and build that network of people where you can possibly learn more about their career paths, and maybe potentially they'll think of you if they have an internship coming up or a job opening that you could apply to. So you share what you've done, you talk about what you do, and it tells a bigger picture. And then when you do reach out to different connections, make sure, this is very important. So there's the mobile application with LinkedIn, and then there's the desktop version. And I strongly recommend using the desktop version when you're reaching out to new professional contacts, even if you know them in real life, especially if they're professionals. Because the desktop version gives you the chance to make that personal note when you reach out to them. And for some reason, I don't know why, the mobile app does not have this option. So you'll potentially be declined if the person doesn't recognize you unless you have that note included. So keep that in mind. And then definitely use LinkedIn to follow up with those folks that you meet at events like this, to do that outreach. And then certainly look through LinkedIn to see what kind of profiles you don't want to emulate, and to tell your story, and some things that you think you could do better for when you fill it out a little bit more and talk about your skills and abilities. Am I missing anything, Callie?
No, I think that was great. I realized I'm unable to add the PDF to the chat, but maybe
Okay.
Cheryl or Kamani can share that with participants afterwards.
Perfect.
Great. Okay, so I like to bring it back around and go back to the start of those acknowledgements that we spoke about. You're here doing something to better yourself and to grow and learn. So again, yay, thanks for joining us. The future is very uncertain for everyone. So is the present. We're in it together. We discussed resources to help you on your future path, but remember, it's a process. You have some work to do. We all have some work to do. Holly and I have work to do, always evolving, always learning, always growing in our careers. Finding a job is hard work. You will fail. You're going to face rejection. You might send out 10 applications and hear back from none of that. Like, you won't get a response from any of them. It's just going to happen. It doesn't mean that you aren't worthy of a great job. Self-acceptance and self-care are so important in this process. And 3 things I want to leave you with is to nix judgment, practice patience, and stay healthy. So nixing judgment means to not think of certain things as good or bad, but simply see them as they are. There are things outside of our control that create outcomes that directly affect us. That's what I was trying to say. So for instance, I graduated in 2008. It was the Great Recession, similar situation to the May 2020 graduates and maybe May 2021 graduates. And it's hard, and you're comparing yourself to other people, and you're looking at everyone else around you. And so we want to try to nix that judgment as we go forward. Even the most I have it together person feels completely and utterly uncertain right now. We want to practice patience and acceptance, and this means respecting that process and your place in that process. So acknowledging that everything is or can be temporary, and we have to reevaluate what worked and what didn't, grow and learn, and then adapt from that. And then we need to stay healthy. We need to start with ourselves first. So if you need to take a break after a long Zoom class, or if you need to take a break after the session and really just think about what we talked about, if you are in the job hunt process and you've applied to 100 jobs and you're looking at your computer screen, stand up, go for a walk, take a breath, listen to some fun music, have your solo dance party. Think about how you can take care of yourself first before you dive into, what's next. Because sometimes we have a habit of just problem solving and moving to the next thing without really thinking about the present. And I'm going to leave you with 2 quotes. I love me some quotes. And Lauren Hill did a really great commencement speech for Temple last year, and that's where I stole this one on the right. So it's indeed is historic in time, and if we're paying attention, pregnant with purpose. Purpose is powerful. The work one puts his or her hands to with purpose attached becomes charged, activated, and often deeply meaningful. Purpose-filled acts can change lives, move communities, and alter the course of history. And so I hope today that we have address this topic purposefully and really have you taking an inventory of yourself so that you can move forward with that purpose when searching for a job. And then I'm a huge Brene Brown fan. I don't know if any of you have heard about her, but she's a really amazing researcher, and she has some really great books out as well. And her quote is, "Just because we didn't measure up to some standard of achievement doesn't mean that we don't possess gifts and talents that only we can bring to the world. Just because someone failed to see the value in what we can create or achieve doesn't change its worth or ours." So again, you may be faced with that rejection, you may fall, but fall forward, and also always believe that you are worthy of that job or that next step in your career. So I hope that today this was helpful for you, and we did just want to open up a Q&A session. If you have any questions or want us to explain things in a little bit more depth, feel free to ask us that.
Yeah. And also I wanted to add, and I think this might be possible, if you see in the chat box, if you haven't tried this yet, I recommend it for when you're in Zoom sessions like this. There's the 3 little dots, and you can save the chat It'll be just like a text or a Word or Notepad document on your computer, and so that you can maybe go back and review some of the links, and I think you'll get some follow-up content as well. But just a little technical tip while you're thinking of questions. And then additionally too, feel free to reach out to me and Callie on LinkedIn with personal notes, preferably, and you can test it out if you want. If you're nervous about it, I'm happy to be that practice person if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn. So feel free.
I also included our emails in there if there's any specific follow-up questions, so you have those as well.
Thank you. Perfect. Yeah.
Thank you, Callie and Holly. That was a great presentation. I'm just going to give the attendees a few minutes to come up with any questions. While we're at that, I have a question regarding resume and building resumes. So I have gotten a lot of different perspective and reviews about references. Do you put references on your resume or do you keep them off?
I would say in my experience as a staff member in the Career Center, also as a hiring manager, I would leave them off because again, that like precious real estate of that one-page document, because the references can always be requested by the employer for when it's time to review them before or after they bring you in for an interview. But I don't know if Callie has some other.
Yeah, so in the most hiring processes, references are the last step. So they're the last thing that an employer is going to do before they give you a job offer. So, and usually when they ask you to fill out an application, so you have to give, usually when you apply, you give your resume and you give that information. There may be an online application where they ask for those references, or when you go in for an interview, they have you fill out an application with that information on it. So again, to Holly's point, that is precious real estate on your resume, but it's also presumptuous to put references on there or say that references are available upon request because you haven't gotten to that stage in the hiring process yet. So I think it's okay to include them if you have them on a separate document, but the employer is usually not going to do that part until they've either phone interviewed you or maybe interviewed you in person.
Thank you. That was very helpful. So another question I have is when we're talking about ourselves on LinkedIn or in general, well, mainly on LinkedIn, I noticed that with the example that you have given, the student talked about himself in third person. Would it be wrong to talk about yourself in first person, or would it be preferred to be talked in third person?
Yeah, so I think that's a personal choice. Mine is in first person. A lot of them are in first person, and Nasir chose third person, but I think it's up to you individually. Holly, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I would echo that. I think most folks who are looking at LinkedIn profiles aren't going to judge you either way. So if you feel like this is something the way you want to tell your story, I think either work perfectly fine.
Good question.
Thank you. So I don't see any Q&A. Thank you, Callie and Holly, for speaking at Love Conference this year. It was a really great presentation, and I hope the attendees took away a lot of beautiful advices that can help them boost their resume and help them find a job. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us. And I do just want to plug the Career Center one more time. We're here for all students. Come visit us. No question is off limits. We'll figure it out if we can.
Yeah, ditto. Thank you so much for having us here today.
Yep, thank you.